Let's talk about secret number 2. Secret number 2 involves review the medical records. This is a preparatory secret. We're in section 1, preparatory secrets. Secret number 1 was prepare, prepare, prepare. Secret number 2 involves a preparation and a review of the medical records. So let's add a little bit more detail to our review of medical records preparation here. And also I discuss this a little bit later on when we get into report writing secrets as well. The point is, review your medical records in advance. Now, in discussing this with some doctors have told me that they don't like to review the medical records in advance because there have been times, and I admit that there have been times with myself as well, where I've put in time on the review of medical records, and that might be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever. This is just an example, but it is possible that you can put in substantial time into the medical records and then have your case cancel on you for whatever reason. And we've all had cases that have rescheduled or canceled or disappeared and who knows what, but the appointment doesn't go through as planned, and some doctors complain that they lost that time because the appointment canceled. And I've had that happen myself, and there have been times when I've changed my procedure and I've decided, no, I'm not going to review the medical records in advance, and I'm not going to do anything in advance because it could cancel. But that happens so rarely that if you do put some time into the review of medical records and for whatever reason the case does cancel, that's okay. That happens so rarely that you shouldn't even worry about that. It's much better to be prepared in advance than it is to prepare in advance and in the rare event have your case cancel on you than it is to not prepare in advance and be unprepared and just go into the examination without the benefit of a thorough review of medical records in advance. So what's involved with a thorough and complete review of records? Well, many doctors recommend the following 4 steps. Number 1 is to sort the records. Sorting the records means putting the records in chronologic order. Chronologic means by date. In the date sequence that things happened with the injured worker. And I know that this is not how we receive the medical records. Most times we receive the medical records in a complete jumble, in no order at all. Or at the very best, the records may be arranged in a reverse chronologic order, sort of printed out in the reverse order that they were entered into the claims adjuster's computer system, and that's the best case scenario. Now, there are very, 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 very rare cases when I've received medical records that are sorted in chronologic order, meaning that the claims administrator or some assistant secretary has sat down with those records and put the documents in date order so that they read like a book from start, the date of injury generally, or even earlier in the case of an extensive relevant medical history, all the way up to the most recent report available. But that's not how we generally get them. We generally get them in a jumble. So what you need to do is you need to sit down and put those records in chronologic order so that it reads like a book. Make sure to discard all duplicates, discard any unrelated documents such as fax cover sheets and blank pages and separator pages, etc. So sort them so that you're left with the book. I call it the book, which is the remaining records from the whole jumble of records that you receive that are the relevant documents from inception of the case all the way to most current. Once you have the records sorted, then you can sit down and you can read the records. So separate procedures: first sorting the records and then reading the records. And when you read the records, you read them like a book, from page 1 all the way to the very last page. And as you read the medical records, you're going to highlight with a highlighter the key facts in the documents, and you're going to highlight the facts that are key for the conclusions of your report. In other words, in the medical records, there's two kinds of facts. There's relevant facts and there's irrelevant facts. And you are the one that determines what's relevant and what's irrelevant, and we define a relevant fact as a fact that supports or contradicts certain conclusions and opinions. So for example, you're going to put in your review of records key facts from documents that you're going to later rely on in support of your conclusions. Or on the other hand, if you disagree with another evaluator or another doctor's opinion, you need to highlight those facts upon which you base your different opinion. So the point is to highlight the key facts upon which you are going to rely for the opinions and conclusions of your report. And once the book of medical records is read from start to finish, and once you've highlighted all the key facts in your documents, then you're going to input those records into the review of records section of your report. And it's here in the inputting of the records where you summarize the key facts from the records. You summarize those in your report. And this allows you to be able to reference the records quickly, both during the evaluation and then later on when you're putting the finishing touches on your report and you need to refer back to something that was a relevant fact that you recall from the medical records. You can quickly just refer back to it by referring to the review of records section of your report. So that was number 3. It was number 1, sort; number 2, read; number 3, input; and then finally the 4th step in the review of medical records is to determine unresolved issues that your examination is then going to address. And the medical records are key for that. They're so helpful for that because it gives you a running chronology of exactly what's happened in the case, and especially the most recent documents allow you to determine what unresolved issues are still pending that requires your examination and your opinion. With regards to review of records, there are several labor codes that govern the review of records and that tell us what exactly it is that we're supposed to do when we do review the records. And when you complete your review of records section, you need to demonstrate to the reader that you've complied with all of these codes governing the review of records. So I'd like to go over these one at a time for your information and for your knowledge, and to show you that the review of records procedure is described in the labor codes and the codes of regulations in exact fashion of how it's supposed to be done. And I've noticed that very few doctors follow this recipe as it's given in the labor codes. Many review of records sections and reports are basically unintelligible and are not organized. They're not I've seen some where they're not even in date order, and so let's review the labor codes so you know what is required and what standard you need to satisfy in your report, which when you do satisfy will really make your report a persuasive and a quality and a thorough report. Now, the first of these is Labor Code 4062.3, Section D, says the following. Says, in any formal medical evaluation, the agreed or qualified medical evaluator shall identify the following. Number 1, all information received from the parties. Number 2, all information reviewed in preparation of the report. Number 3, all information relied upon in the formulation of his or her opinion. So you need to identify that. That's where the inputting portion of the review of records comes into play. You identify to the parties the information you received, the information you reviewed, and the information that you relied upon goes in your report. You're required to identify that, and you're required to identify it specifically. For example, in satisfying section number 1 here, all information received from the parties, you wouldn't simply say, I received a stack of 400 pages from the claims administrator. That doesn't satisfy this Labor Code section, 4062.3D. You have to list all information that you received, all information that you reviewed, and all information that you relied upon. And see, the purpose of this is so that the reader can refer back to the medical records and find out if your opinions and conclusions have any basis in the medical records. And your opinions and conclusions should have some basis, the easily demonstrable basis in the medical records. The next labor code involved with the review of records is Labor Code 4628A, Section 2. This requires that the physician review and summarize the prior medical records. Review and summarize. So this code requires that you review, which means read, and summarize, which means you input the records into your report and you summarize those reports, highlighting the key facts, the key points, the key information, the key data upon which the opinions and conclusions of your report rely. So far, just using a combination of Labor Code 4062.3, we're required to identify. How do you identify? You identify it by inputting in your report. Labor Code 4628 requires us to review and summarize. How do you review and summarize? You read them and you input them. Input a summary. Not the whole thing, but a summary. A summary of the key points into the review of records section of your report. Title 8 CCR 10606, that is, entitled The Physician's Report as Evidence. This section states, these reports should include, where applicable, Section D says, a listing of all information received from the parties reviewed in preparation of the report or relied upon for the formulation of the physician's opinion. So this is kind of a restatement of Labor Code 4062.3, but this one says that we're required to include a listing of all information. So far we have one code that says we must identify information. Another one says we must review and summarize information. This code says that we must list all information. Well, listing might be the same as identify. Would you agree? We identify any information that we received by creating a list of it. And in a minute I'm going to share with you a template that you can use to make sure you comply with all these requirements. Finally, the last section is Title 8 CCR 41, Section B, subsection 2, says, all QMEs, regardless of whether the injured worker is represented by an attorney, so that means represented and unrepresented workers, shall review all available relevant medical and non-medical records and or facts necessary for an accurate and objective assessment of the contested medical issues in an injured worker's case before generating a written report. When must it be done? It must be done before generating the written report, and I'm recommending that it actually be done before meeting with the injured worker. Continuing to read here, says the report must list and summarize all medical and non-medical records reviewed as part of the evaluation. You must list and summarize. Can you just list the records? In other words, on January 1st, 2011, there was a doctor's first report from Jones, MD. Can you just list it? No. You must list and summarize. So what we have here is we have 4 labor codes. One says we must identify the records. The second one says we must review and summarize the records. The third one says we must list. And then the fourth code says that we must list and summarize all medical and non-medical records. So, doctors, the labor code and the code of regulations are clear on what we must do in order to satisfy the burden of the review of medical records, and I rarely see it done in compliance with these 4 codes. But the very best and most persuasive doctors make sure that their reports comply with each of these requirements, because that indicates to the reader a degree of precision and a degree of accuracy and a degree of attention to detail that 1,000 words cannot convey. And as part of this program, I give you a template that you can import into your own reports to make sure that you've satisfied the burden of these codes that relate to the review of records.